Hello and welcome to TelecomTV. I'm Martin Warwick. We are on tour. We are in the RAI Exhibition Centre in Amsterdam in the Netherlands, and we're at Broadband World Forum 2014. And I'm talking with Lyubov Sabinina, who is Head of Customer Experience Analytics at Vimpelcom, Russia. Welcome. Thanks for talking to us.
Thank you.
Haven't spoken to a Russian service provider and operator for a very long time, so it's a pleasure to talk to you. What's good about this show, this event, is there are a lot of service providers here, which as a journalist is good for me to talk to them rather than vendors for a change, but it's also good for you because you can speak to your compatriots in other countries.
Yeah.
What do you get out of that?
Well, I'm very happy to share my views on and see how the industry of telecommunications evolving in other countries. And what I see that we all face the same problems. The telecommunication providers in different countries, that market gets saturated, and the value drives away from internet and voice providers to the IT players. So, and we need in a way to reinvent ourselves, and that's something very interesting, and it's an interesting epoch to live in. So,
you're talking about business transformation, and you're also talking about network transformation as far as the network itself and technologies are concerned. Okay. Now let's put Vimpelcom Russia in context. You're in a competitive environment. There are three main federal operators plus a fourth low-cost entrant. Tell us about those, because I know that you cover 1/3 of the Russian population. So you have 50 million subscribers out of a population of 150 million.
So first of all, Russia is a very big country. It has 11 time zones. And the Russian population is 148 million people. And we have three main players, which are Beeline, a trademark of Vimpelcom, my company, MTS, and Megaphone. They are all about to have 1/3 of the market each. And we have in the different regions different local operators, and some of them have now started to explode. So one of them is Tele2, which is not represented everywhere, but starts to grow and to become a federal one. And they have a completely different strategy from other three big players. They're low coster. So we need to find a way how to work with them and work in this new environment. Okay, now
Vimpelcom Russia is what you might call a full service service provider, because you have mobile and you have fixed line.
Fixed, yeah, so both B2C and B2B.
Okay, now then, let's talk about the juggling with plates out there. Not much lunch is coming up, obviously. Not much we can do about that. Hope we don't do too much of it. Let's talk about business transformation and network transformation. As networks change, as we move to an all-IP network, as we move towards the cloud, as we move towards SDN and NFV, all the new stuff that's happening around it, hand in hand with that goes business transformation. And you have a very, very intriguing job, because you are Head of Customer Experience Analytics. First question on this is, where do you get your data from? Is it individual consumers? Is it businesses?
Where do we get?
Yes, where does the information, where does the data that you manipulate come from?
It comes from both. We're having a separate system that collects the feedback from B2C and B2B customers and trying to structure that and understand what they really want. And getting back to the network transformation question, I think that the demand of the customer on the network has been growing so fast over the last years that not all the operators were prepared to that. And customers still keep demanding. That's why it's very important for a mobile operator or for a fixed operator as well to understand where to focus its efforts in a technology area to cope with this growing demand.
Now, where is the greatest demand coming from? We see in the West definitely enormous demand for video, and the amount of video packets that are crossing the network with all the contingencies of latency, etc. Is that what's happening in Russia?
Yeah, exactly the same thing. I mean, the people start more and more to surf through internet, and yes, they're using a lot social networks. And as soon as they start using social networks, they very quickly start to use video, online video, and that's, as you know, puts a lot of restriction on capacity, because it's requires a lot of capacity from the network to serve.
So you have a constantly expanding requirement for more broadband.
Yeah.
How do you provide that?
Well, that's a very good question. I mean, first of all, of course, through IPization. So Russia is a big country. That's why it's really a long process of IPization of the whole country. It's also adapting moving to the next generation of technologies, so LTE, and starting to push more and more the market to be ready on the device level for that. So we are trying to use more cost-effective technologies, and secondly, what we are trying to do, and it's in my area of responsibility, we try to focus the efforts of technology people in the area where it really matters to the customers. And that's how we use the feedback collection mechanism. We are collecting their feedback about the network, about what they precisely want from the voice services and from the data services, and where do they need them, these services, and what kind of quality indicators are really important for them, and try to focus our network development around those.
Presumably, what you're doing is you're part of or central to a feedback loop. So you have the information, the data come in, the raw data. You then break down that data and
we structure it. We structure it in a way that it can be digestible by the relevant functions in the organization.
Well, must be where the hard part is, because you get the data, you get comments, you say this is good but can be better, this is bad and needs sorting out, whatever it may be, and then you have to transmit that to other parts within Vimpelcom and get them to buy it. They've got to buy into this, haven't they? How do you do that?
Well, that's how all the transformational projects and programs are done. You start to, first of all, explaining the business value of what you're doing. And in my case, the customer experience, it's the money that lies behind it, the monetization of the loyalty. Because we all understand that we live on a very saturated market with a very high SIM penetration. We don't have any new customer there. They are not there. So we just need to serve very well our existing base.
So basically what you're saying is that you can't get any bigger organically now. You've reached the limit. Yes,
that's true.
And you don't think you're ever going to be able to take a significant number of subscribers from the other networks by offering something. That is the business that you have.
Yes, we just need to grow our revenues, to find a way to grow our revenues with the existing customer base.
And that means services and applications that customers want to use at a price they're willing to pay.
And at the quality that they want.
Okay.
So, and then we just translate it to very concrete things for each department, for marketing, for network, for call center, for retail. So we translate this feedback on the language of these functional departments. They are KPIs. And just start to think, to start to measure what the customers really want and how much it will pay off in terms of loyalty if they get it.
Okay. Now, $64,000 question then here is this. How do they treat you? Your department is saying, look, there's some good news and some bad news. This is what people are saying about you. This is an engineering problem, this is a marketing problem, this is a sales problem, this is a technology problem. I'm passing it on to you and we need action. Do they go, oh God, she's here again?
Well, it was like that at the beginning. But then once people start to see that the data that customer provides really makes sense and really brings value to them, in what sense? And before they all knew that there are some problems. They are aware of their problems, but they don't know how much it influences. And I'm giving them with my feedback from the customer, with the customer loyalty indexes that I have. I give them how much is this pain for the customer, and what will you get if you eliminate it. That makes it much easier to take decisions and to make actions, because you understand what the value will be.
So, is it successful? Is Vimpelcom more responsive? Does it embrace change more than it used to?
I would say that it's a very long process. It's a transformation of the business, because you move away from the old model when you were expanding and not caring very much what's going on and what are you providing, just moving forward to a model that you need to really very carefully watch your every step and based on your existing customer base and to serve them well. And it requires a lot of money and effort, and you need to really prioritize that. So it's a new way of doing things around the customer, and I think it cannot be implemented in 1 year or 2 years. It's a long story of transformation of how the business is done.
I was very interested when you mentioned loyalty, customer loyalty. In the UK, for example, which is where I'm from, throughout Europe, throughout much of the world, there is no loyalty to a mobile operator. Zero, almost zero. Mm-hmm. There's loyalty to technology, there's loyalty to devices. Mm-hmm. Microsoft, Apple, Nokia, Samsung, whatever it may be, but there's no loyalty to service providers. If a better offer comes along from somebody else, people will churn, businesses will churn, and they'll go to where there's a better deal. So how do you maintain the loyalty of your customers that you have, given that you can't expand your user base?
By focusing and providing them, by providing them, your customers, what they need, by focusing on what they need. And for that, you really need to have feedback, structure it well, attribute it to something that is very well understandable by your organization, each your department, and work on that. So that's the way it works. I mean, and I think that the loyalty in the way that you envision it, it's a very hard question. What you call loyalty? It's because different people call loyalty different things. And for business organization like Vimpelcom, loyalty is something that monetizes in churn, in higher consumption, in better cost to serve, cheaper serving, and in recommendations. That's basic stuff. And you just, as soon as you are able to really quantify that and show that to your business and show them you influence on that part, and you influence on that part, and explain them that if you do these actions, that's how much you will get. It's such this complex notion of loyalty becomes very simple.
I take it then that the analytics, the data, the feedback loop is a continual iterative process, mm-hmm. So it never stops.
Yeah,
it's going
true.
On all the time.
That's
well,
true.
Let's move forward a bit and look to where there could well be.
Ladies and gentlemen, please note that the keynote room is now open for all and nearly through to be commencing the presentation at 12:20. Thank you.
That was nicely timed. I'll pick up on that question. So let's move forward a bit then and look at potential future services and applications that mm-hmm. might well attract users. What about the Internet of Things? What's happening around the world at the moment? We've been told that by 2020 there will be 26 billion, at least 26 billion things attached to the Internet. Fridges, cars, health service, all sorts of things. Is Internet of Things well known and beginning to take off as far as Vimpelcom Russia is concerned, or is it still something out there in the future?
Well, it depends on which segment. I think that there are a lot of good use cases in B2B environment for the Internet of Things, for machine-to-machine applications, etc. But for B2C users, it's something that is still in the future, and we are still moving to towards smartphonization of our base. So we are far from having 100% penetration of smartphones. We're just explaining to the market the value of mobile internet in itself. And then the next step would be to really use the connectivity of all the devices.
But if it's anything like the rest of the world, which it is, then of course smartphones will take over in due course. There will be smartphones everywhere in Russia, and people will understand why they're important and gain internet access and broadband access through that.
Yeah, I think for Internet of Things, for the development of Internet of Things, we just need some market needs some very concrete business examples, very concrete use cases of what is it and how it works and what is the value for the customer. I mean, as soon as we have these use cases and they are easy to understand and easy to create, to make work, it will fly.
A final question to you, which is a light-hearted one. We're asking all our service provider interviewees this question. You will, in your job, or certainly your service provider colleagues, will be bombarded with communications from vendors who want you to buy this, please buy this or else. It's going to do this, it's going to provide you with more profits, more revenues and so on. If the boot was on the other foot, and for once you had one day when you could talk to the vendor ecosystem and say, I want this now, what would it be? What would you ask for?
It's a very good question, and I have an answer for that.
Good.
That I prepared.
Yes, I sprung it on you, so go on.
Yeah. I want to see my customer in everything that they do. Because taking for example the vendors of networks, they are traditionally structured around network elements. And it's very hard additional software that needs to be, and hardware to be built to see your customer there. I would ask all the vendors, network vendors, IT vendors, etc., to give me the view of my customer, of what my customer gets out of with the help of this vendor or this service. I want to see my customer.
Bob Sabinina, thank you very much indeed. Fascinating interview.
Thank you. The pleasure was mine.